Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Adventures at Halftime. And I am honored to have on today's episode Andy McCluskey. Andy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, you know what's so interesting? I have a mutual connection with Andy and my neighbor, my dear friend Mark, who I go elk hunting with and all kinds of boy shenanigans. Um, Mark said that Andy would be a great interview. I said, well, I didn't understand, Andy, like your background before getting a chance to know you. Because I'd gone to Super Bowl parties and so on and so forth. And I had an opportunity to take a look at, the things that you've done
Oh,
in business, which we'll get into a little bit, and what you currently are doing, spinning
some
many
good, some bad.
spinning plates, right? As you
Yeah.
are the serial entrepreneur and CEO like yourself. And then also your travels and journey. And I had, for the audience, I had an opportunity to spend a Super Bowl party with the McCluskey, the extended McCluskey family, a rich and deep, far and deep, wide and deep family, legacy family in the Treasure Valley in Idaho. And it was just a blast. And at the end, Andy provided me with one of his self memoirs. It's called A Good Run. And it's self published, and he's kind of kept it close to the vest, provided it to families. And as you can see, I've marked it an awful lot about his family heritage, things have happened in the Treasure Valley, but also his POV, his point of view on life. And that's what we're about here at Adventures at Halftime, because we really believe that, fear is a lie and darkness distorts, but also a life not examined is really not a life worth living. And so, Andy, welcome. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you very much. The compliment's undeserved, but thank you.
It's well deserved. Just wait until everybody hears what's going on here. So, Andy, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do today, and then we're going to unpack, your history and some of the life lessons that you've learned over the years. So, share the audience, your LinkedIn history, if you will, the
Well,
professional side. We'll get into the personal side.
yeah. So I was born in Caldwell, Idaho. I attended the University of Idaho for 2 years, after which my mother asked me to come down to run a family business. My father was ill, and the business was not doing very well. I can remember we had two vendors. Well, one vendor and a bank. With the bank, we were, no, two vendors. We were overdraft $25,000 with, we owed each vendor 25,000. That's about 225,000 in today's money. So it was a meat processing business. And, I think we were not in good shape. We could have been considered broke. But I went to the vendors, Jim Pack and Idaho Meat Pack, and sat down and said, okay, we owe you the money. I've come in for the business to run the business, and will you give us some time to pay you off? And they did, and we did. So they had a good standing. Uh, Now later on in this troubled business department, we were overdraft at our bank and assigned to special credits. And trust me, you're not special when you're assigned to special credits. Those are the rubber hose boys that want to liquidate your business and get you out of, get rid of you, save what kind of money they could. We had a loss, a drug related loss, where some people, I was packing meat products for a couple of large companies, Orida and Cisco. The volume was probably more than I could handle. I didn't control the inventory, put on a second shift, and the second shift we're stealing these $300 boxes of meat and selling them for $25. I didn't control it. So all of a sudden we were in big trouble. Now I'm going to finish this story by telling you something I'm not very proud of. And I'll probably, for the rest of this podcast, people will think less of me. We were assigned to special assets, and they said, okay, we're gonna give you 80 cents, loan you 80 cents of the dollar on receivables, 50 cents on inventory. And every day you fill out a borrowing base certificate. That's common in this kind of situation. So we were really short on money and trying to turn this business around. We were making a product called finger steaks, which is kind of a local product, steak battered. Um, so on one day, our accountant came to us and said, Andy, we've got a problem. We're maxed out on what we can borrow in receivables. We do have some more inventory coming in, but it won't come in until this afternoon. And we are overdraft. So the bank said to us clearly at the first, if you go overdraft, we're going to shut you down. So I said to her, you're telling me if it was 1 o'clock right now and our inventory came in, we'd be fine, but this money's got to be in the bank, this borrowing certificate this morning, and I don't have the inventory. So I said, okay, let's fill out the certificate as if we received the inventory. That was bad. I'm not very proud of that. Now, I did, and we turned the business around, paid the bank back everything. Actually, we were nominated for Idaho Business of the Year, and then I by that time had made a decision to change banks. I had to go down to him and said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were going to nominate us. I'm changing banks because I got a better deal from another bank." And so they pulled the nomination. However, they had my wife and our photos taken professionally, and I still have that hanging on a wall, the photo of the two of us. But it taught me a lesson in life, which is honest people will do dishonest things in desperate times. I
Mm.
was desperate to keep the business open. I did a dishonest thing, and I'm really an honest individual. And that helped as I grew my business career and started looking at acquisitions, let's say 25, 30 years later. Uh, it really helped because I've had some people say, okay, buy my business. Now we make an extra $1 million. It isn't on the statement. How do you mean you make an extra million? Well, we have some cash business and we keep some of that cash. Well, are you going to pay me for that? They would say, yeah, come on, pay me the money based, the multiple based upon that $1 million. I said, no, we're not going to pay you for that. And you're dishonest. We don't want anything to do with it. Uh, I had one fellow I went in to buy in the school business, and it was a fairly large distributor. He had prime rib. And I said, what in the world do you have prime rib if you're selling school lunch to kids? Well, he said, we've got this chain of restaurants and we bring him prime rib and he pays us in cash. And another fellow said, well, I don't issue W-2s. All my employees are 1099s. So it just taught me the good people, but we didn't want anything. I didn't want anything to do with people that are doing anything the slightest bit dishonest. So I'm kind of rambling, but
Mhm.
that's sort of a brief start about my business career.
Mhm. But it's very human, from a perspective of looking. Today is 2024,
Yeah,
and there are thus businesses that are doing great, that are really heavily capitalized, and then there are the small businesses that are almost paycheck to paycheck or month to month, and
right.
figuring out how you're going to hustle to support payroll. And I think as a business owner, you also have a response. You feel a responsibility, no matter what the media says, evil business people, but you have a response. You feel like you have a responsibility to people who are with you and loyal to you and work and grind in your business because they have families. So it's just beyond making a buck. You're supporting an economy, you're supporting families. And that must have been a time quite challenging. And I think there's times like that on the horizon now that people are starting to think about that. And the economics also encourage it. Government regulation and things like that encourage that type of behavior because it puts people in. It's like, you, I think I heard that um, every day somebody breaks at least two felonies if you look at the complete federal law, the
Yeah,
UCC code,
yeah.
and so it's like it's a weird thing. You got any comments on that from like there to today, how
Well,
humanity hasn't changed?
I don't want to make this political, but I do
No,
think
sure.
in my career, what I've seen is uh, regulation.
Yeah.
The government doesn't realize how much regulation they put on a business. Now,
Hmm.
just heard on the news, they're talking about inflation and how food is inflating. Well, if
Hmm.
you look at every part of inflation, it's some government regulation. My wife's brother is a truck driver. He's here today for 2 days because he can't work because he's exceeded his time.
Hmm.
That's cost that trucking industry money that they've, and the only way they get it back is by raising the price. Uh, the whole tariff situation, while I understand we have a trade war with China, the tariff is just a tax. I'm involved in a business now, and our tariff was 4 or 5%, something like that. Then all of a sudden, they jump it up to 20. So what do? I got to add it onto the price, so that increases the inflation.
Hmm.
And so you just take every segment. When I was in the meat business, the first career was in the meat processing business. We had meat inspection services, and it just added to your cost. They would come in and say, well, we don't think you've cleaned that piece of equipment well enough, so bring in a crew to clean it. So we brought in a crew, paid the money, added the price of ground beef up a half a cent a pound or something to pay for it. So, I think that the government should look at that whole regulation thing and say less regulation would improve the economy. But
Hmm.
that's the only political thing I'll say today.
Yeah, no, no doubt. And we'll pivot from that right now. Um, you had mentioned that was early in your career, and several companies have passed and now and still um, producing value to our economy and your work. And what is your current role, and what companies and spaces are you involved in now?
Well, let me see. That first, I was in the food business, meat processor.
Hmm.
Uh, I made ground beef, and then we made this finger steak. Then I sold that portion of the business and got into the food distribution business, serving schools.
Hmm.
Then I merged that business with a company in San Diego. So I'm in Boise, or Caldwell. Merged it with a company in San Diego who was in the business of selling closeout foods to prisons.
Hmm.
And so I had the expertise in schools, so they kind of taught me about closeouts. Those that closeouts are excess inventory,
Right.
and so we would offer closeouts to schools. Now, again, I don't want to be political, but since then they saved the schools maybe 30 or 40% on a product. But since then, the government has regulated nutrition to schools so that the
Hmm.
French fries got to be such and such way, and you can only serve so much, and it's increased the cost of school lunch. Then I got involved. Well, first, I retired at 65. First, I sold. I get it back up. Sorry, Bob. I've got to merged the two businesses. So I was running the Idaho operation. I had a partner in San Diego. The partner in San Diego, I said, well, let's recapitalize this. Got us some investors to come in, private equity people and insurance companies, large insurance companies. And at that time, our EBITDA was quite high, and my partner got his money, and so he decided to retire. Our CFO in San Diego then took over the business, and he didn't perform uh, well for whatever reason. The EBITDA fell in half. So now the insurance company said to me, "Would you come down for a short period of time and see if you can look at this and run this business because we're going the wrong direction." So I did, and uh, a short period of time turned out to flying down weekly from Boise to San Diego. I would fly down on Sunday night, fly back on Friday, play golf on Saturday because I was such a great husband, and then Sunday I would have a little time with my wife and fly down. And that short period of time was 10 years of this weekly commute. And the turnaround, I got the credit for the turnaround and deserved none of it. We had great people
Mm.
down there. My predecessor would walk around to people and say, "What are you going to do for me?"
Mm.
Every day. There was, I don't know how many salespeople, maybe 50. What are you going to do for me? And my approach has always been, what can I do for you? How can I help you? How's your family? Because I really think if you show people love, that you care and you want to help them and make them successful, you'll reap the reward. And it's turned around. Anyway, we turned around the business, and then we sold it to private equity people. I stayed for 5 years with the private equity people. Um, it's kind of a funny thing. The night it closed, I was 60 years old. The night it closed, they said, "You want to go to dinner?" I said, "Of course." So we went to dinner, and they said, "Andy, we've got to tell you something. You can stay as CEO for 3 years. The next 2 years, we're going to replace you. You can stay on the board, but we're going to flip the company in 5 years, and you'll be 65, and we cannot get the same multiple with a 65-year-old CEO." It's the first time anybody said to me, "You're old." I didn't feel old. I just didn't feel old, but and that's exactly what happened. I stayed. We continued to grow the business. I had a replacement come in, and I stayed 2 years on the board, actively helping, and then I retired. So then I did not like retirement. Uh, I brother-in-law came to me in San Diego. He said, "I've got an idea. Coffee," he said, "it's hot coffee and it spills." He said, "I've got an idea with this little plastic plug. We can plug the hole in the coffee so it won't spill." So I said, "Well, I don't think it'll sell, but I'll invest in the company." So I invested in the company and said, "I'm bored. Let me see if I can help you." So I helped set up the accounting, and on the purchasing side, I had a lot of connections in Asia. So I had a contact over there and said, "I'll help you set up and manufacture this in China." So the first manufacturer we had was in Ningbo, China, and he wasn't a very good manufacturer. I'm trying to be kind. Uh, our largest customer was Starbucks. I wasn't going to mention names, but it's a little green plug at the end of if you get your coffee and you want it
Yep.
to not. So Starbucks has good, strict standards of procurement, social responsibility, full disclosure. Uh, I mean, they've got a whole book on
Hmm.
standards. And this guy wasn't honest. I mean, they want their people in China to not be overworked and to be paid a minimum wage. And he wasn't doing that. And he wouldn't let them in, let the auditors in uh, to audit his records. And he called one day and said, "Well, we've got a problem. The auditor is that they want to let in is dishonest, and he wants money under the table." And I said, "George, I can't believe it. No, 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 they're just dishonest. I'm not going to play the game." Well, the truth was he was lying. The next day, the vice president at Starbucks got on a plane and went over with my partner to meet with him and called and said, "This guy's lying. The auditor's fine. He's the one that's uh, not doing things properly." So I ended up then getting another manufacturer in a city called Yantai. It's northern China, and a really good one. And I think I've been to China now 34 times. When I first went, I said, I'll never figure out China. and so big and overwhelming, I'll never figure it out. About the 10th trip, I said, I've got it figured out. I think I know it. And it wasn't until about the 17th trip I said, I'll never figure out China. You know, it's so big. But I found them to be very nice people. This particular manufacturer, not only nice, but honest, and they want to do the right thing. This company is owned by uh, partially by the Japanese. So it's sort of a joint venture between the Chinese. They pack for 7-Eleven in Japan, and then they pack for us. So that was as a result of going so many times. My wife said, smell the roses. Excuse me. Take a week if you like. Just travel around and see other parts of Asia. Starbucks Asia Pacific office was in Hong Kong. So I've been there many times. They had a DC in Singapore, and I've been there many times. And it just allowed me to travel throughout Asia. Now, believe it or not, I'm 78 and I've had a stroke. So
Hmm.
I don't show too well when I go to Seattle to Starbucks, but I am still working. The company's doing fine. It's been a challenge because there's quite a war on plastics, and I've been finding other resins to
Hmm.
make product out of other resins. But and then the chapter that I've just finished, I'm going to cough again. Excuse me. Is I approached the city where I live to see if I could put in a viewing area, platform viewing area on top of this hill that overlooks the Boise River, where the Oregon Trail came through. So there's quite a bit of history. And I put a couple of viewing benches, and now I've got QR codes on coins on this. So you can go and scan a coin, and it will give you a history of what happened. For example, you look to the right from the bench, you see the Ward Massacre, where 28 people were killed by the Indians, 28 of the settlers. And you look to the left and you see where they forded the river uh, to settle. You look behind you, there's the first woman buried that died from the wagon train. Anyway, that's been kind of a fun project. And I'm recording this thing with this history. And, you know, I've used the library, and I certainly didn't research the history, but I put it together. Okay.
Wow.
Now I'm going to take a quick drink. Well,
Sure. Amazing. I mean, and still moving forward and being agile, working on the business, not in the business, if you will, the difference between the two.
yeah,
Um,
I would say
Very
so.
fascinating. I want to go to your book because I think it really jumps into, and I've got some funny questions. It said that one of your descriptors of who you are, and it was written in your yearbook.
Oh,
You're the
yeah.
sort of chap who follows you into a revolving door and comes out first.
Yeah, you know, I worry
I
about
thought that
that.
was great.
I don't know if that's a compliment or not.
Oh,
I was active in school. I was the president of the band and vice president of the student body and
yeah.
debate club and all kinds of stuff. And I don't know if that descriptor meant I was kind of a ruthless guy that would follow you in and kick you out of the way and go out the other end, or it was a guy that wanted to get ahead. So I don't know if it's a compliment, but that's what they wrote about me. Yeah.
What I took away from that was that you stuck with it. And some people
Yeah.
just, you say, hey, what comes out on the I'm coming out first, and maybe you got off the wheel earlier, but this is a path I'm choosing and full of energy. And I think anybody gets a chance to meet you and chat with you, your humor and wit as well, I think speaks loudly to that as well. There's so many unique things there. But I find that interesting, the little byline in your senior
Yeah.
class book, and I think it
Yeah.
sticks. It
Yeah, well,
sticks.
again, we have a reunion coming up this year. I don't even know how many years it is, but long. And I'm going to ask about that byline. Who wrote that? What did they mean when they were giving me that identifier thing?
I think it was very clever, and that you used it in your memoir here. But let's take another dip into your philosophy on life, because this is about also handing off, if you will, legacy information, and
Yeah.
inspiring the next generation, those that haven't come, that still have to come after us, if you will, in the process of life. And you wrote and penned in your book, A Good Run, that one lesson was thoughtfully train people before you asking anyone to do anything. Can you unpack that a little bit?
You know, if you hire somebody and want them to do something for you, just say, go do it. It's not fair. It's not fair to them. It's really important to just properly train and work with and teach, and then you can have them do their thing, and also acknowledge they may fail. And if they fail, no problem. We'll just take another run at it. But uh, I that's what I meant by that statement.
Yeah. Where did you learn that in your life? At what point did that click?
Well, the first thing was delivering newspapers. I think I, when I was a young boy, a guy had a newspaper route, and he said, "I'm going to go on vacation and with my family. Would you deliver the papers?" I said, "Great." He didn't train me anything, and I took my bicycle, riding down the street, throwing a paper everywhere. I delivered to all the wrong houses. I had no clue the paper went wherever I wanted to throw them, and I got fired
Hmm.
on his return. So it kind of taught me, maybe if he would have taught me, I maybe continued with the job. But
How about never pass an opportunity to buy lemonade or golf balls from a young person?
yeah, I used to hunt for golf balls in a ditch. We lived near a golf course, a little public golf course, 9-hole golf course, and I'd go down and stand in the ditch and try to find golf balls, and then I'd sell them on the street. And so I just, when you look around, you see somebody with selling golf balls or selling lemonade, I won't pass them up. I'll buy it.
Yeah, inspiring future entrepreneurs. Who knows, huh?
Yeah, who knows? That's right.
Somebody believed in you enough to buy a cup of lousy lemonade and a beaten up
Yeah,
Pro
that's right.
V1,
The beat up
right?
golf ball, top flight golf ball.
Yeah,
You
Kirkland.
don't need to be disparaging there about top flight.
It's true. Give a child responsibility to work as early as you can. It's wonderful for their self-confidence. It seems so obvious, but it's a
Yeah,
timeless truth. What would you have
I
to say to
started
that?
really early. I remember, I don't know, I had one job where I scooped ice cream. We had a 24 flavor ice cream thing, and I was just a kid scooping ice cream. Maybe at that job I was 14. I hated it. You get your knuckles in the ice cream all the time. My grandfather put me to work when I was 12, counting cash at a little restaurant that he owned. So when people would come up with a check, they would hand me the check and I would count out the cash. You can imagine the confidence when you got a 12-year-old counting your money and giving you the correct change. He also had a clever idea. He had a coffee concept where he put a little hot pad on every table and had his coffee on it. So you had your own pot of coffee that you could pour on the table where you sat. And one day a patron, he was walking around the restaurant saying, "How'd you enjoy your meal?" And the patron said, "Harry, this is the worst cup of coffee I've ever had. It's been sitting on this pad. Every time I come in here, your coffee is awful." And my grandfather looked at him and said, "Well, thank you for the compliment. At least we're consistent." I thought that's kind of taught me something. And
That's great.
just look bad.
Um, Another lesson. This was the five in the book, and you have many others, which we'll get into. But sometimes you can be ahead of your time. Unpack that one. I'd love to hear that.
Oh, let me see what I referred to when.
Is it referring to your father asked you to work in the commissary?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Peeling shrimp and making French fries for Harry's restaurants.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, um, so we I worked in the commissary real young, and we'd peel shrimp and bread shrimp, and sell it to my grandfather's restaurants. He had uh, 4 or 5 of these fast food restaurants, and some of the products we'd make, they just didn't go. You were kind of ahead of your time. You thought that they would be popular. And in the meat business, I did a lot of development of products, and some were good, and some were bad, and some were kind of ahead of their time. I noticed that I failed, and then later on, somebody picked up the same concept and did well with it, and that happens. So I think that's what I was referring to.
Gotcha. Well, it's interesting. I think that happens with a lot of just entrepreneurial people who are creatives as well as
Yeah.
problem solvers. Nobody's written about it, but I just speak about it just for an observation point. Apple in the 80s or early 90s had, before Steve Jobs' departure and his replacement came in for Pepsi. Can't remember the guy's name now. But the Apple had created something called the Newton. And if you remember, it looked about this, almost the size of a handheld old abacus calculator.
Mm.
And it had a screen on it that you could send orders, write orders. You had to plug in. It wasn't wireless, but you had to plug in a phone line. You can send your orders in, send faxes, send notes.
Mm.
You could keep track, had a calculator, had like 10 or 12 different features on it. And it was about $1,000 at the time. And I lived in Silicon Valley. I thought, this is amazing. And after 2 years, they abandoned it. But then 10 years, fast forward 10 years, guess what came about? The iPod. Put that
Yeah.
1,000 songs in your pocket. And then the iPhone, which
Yeah.
was the super, steroided version of those early concepts and those early things that Apple or Steve Jobs had ideated, many, many, many years ago. The marketplace wasn't ready for it. Marketplace
Yeah.
wasn't ready,
Yeah. No, I can understand that. It's fascinating just to see the whole technology thing and how it's changed. You used to write a waitress would come around with a pad and write your order on a piece of paper. Now they've got a little computer transmits it back to the kitchen, and I, I saw that in China first about 15 years ago.
And they were already
They,
there.
they,
Yeah.
they were there.
And we're so enamored with our high-speed fiber internet now, real quick.
Mhm.
Well, North Korea's had that for about 10 years.
Yeah, yeah,
Super fast, it's
yeah. I think Bob,
adoption is slow.
a lot of smart people around the world.
Oh, that's for sure. Let's talk
And
about your travels around the world. Or you want to finish your thought there?
well, the only thing I would say is we think for some reason we're the smartest, and we are smart, but there's smart people everywhere around the world. And um, you know,
Definitely.
I think I've been lucky to see them. I would like to tell you 2 stories, kind of humorous stories about
Please.
travels. So in '92, my wife and I with another couple were going to South Africa, and so I got this idea. Mandela had been let out of prison. I may have the year wrong, but I'm close. And I wrote him a letter to President Mandela asking to meet with him. I tried to say I'm a nice folks and we real admire you, and I just sure I'd like the pleasure of meeting you. I didn't get a reply. I don't understand it. So now roll forward. I got involved in this company in the Middle East. So a fella came to me, a relative, and said, Andy, would you give me some money? I want to start a foundation for the victims of the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. He said, people are getting killed or blown up, and I want to have kind of a counseling service for those victims. And I said, well, I've got an idea. Why don't we start a business? I said, you get a cup of coffee. Well, he said first, what are we going to sell? I said, well, here's my idea. You get a cup of coffee, and it has a paper jacket on it to keep from burning your hands. We're going to make that out of cloth. So the Israelis will sew the shell of this on a sewing machine. Now we're going to take it to the Palestinians and they can hand embroider the design. And then we'll take it back to Israel. And then I will take it to Starbucks and see if I can land the account. Well, first trip I went, the women in the West Bank of Palestine are very poor. They're living in caves. We couldn't talk to them because of the culture. So we talked to the men with the women outside kind of giggling. We ended up buying several hundred of these sleeves. And this doesn't have a good ending, this story. The sad thing is we really had, I don't know the exact count, 100 to 200 women meeting once a week, Palestinians and Israelis, to sew this sleeve, coffee sleeve, loving each other, talking about family and kids and what they're doing the next week, and just people liking each other. So I got them and I took them to the customer, and it was too political. Now, this is way before even the current war. It was too political. They said, okay, if we put it in New York City in a store, a Hasidic Jew might say, what are you doing helping the Palestinians? And a Palestinian might say, what are you doing helping the Jews? Mm-hmm. And they said, we just don't want the politics around it. So, make a long story short, after several years, I failed. I'll have to get you some. I still have 400 or 500 in my garage here in Caldwell.
I'll take a couple off your hand. I love that.
But it was sad because first thing is I'm a half-assed Presbyterian, so I got no fight in this battle. My friend partner is a half-assed Buddhist. He changes quite often. So we don't have any religious fight in this whole thing. We just recognize and believe that if you empower women economically, you can make a difference. And what we were trying to do is start a company with women. And by the way, the next trip to Palestine, after we first bought 200 or 300 of these, we talked with the women, not the men. We were really empowering them economically. And all we wanted to do is send a message to the world. Well, part of the problem is that, we're in Caldwell, Idaho, and I wasn't connected with a movie star in Los Angeles. I could say, here's what we've got. Company was called Two Neighbors. Great concept. We had the infrastructure so that nobody was taking money away from anybody. Mm-hmm. We even had a deal where Israel has a minimum wage. Palestine did not. We said, no, we're not going to treat them differently. We're going to pay both the Israelis and the Palestinians the same wage. So it priced this sleeve, this Java jacket, it's not Java jacket, it's probably a registered name, but this cover for a cup, priced it so it was $7 or $8. Whereas in Bangladesh, they could do the same thing on a machine and sell it for $1 or $2 because there's no restrictions on minimum wage and that sort of thing. So anyway, we failed. It's probably the only failure that I've really had, and you're disappointing poor people, and that hurts. And I'm still in contact with some. I haven't been there for at least 10 to 15 years now, but I'm still in contact with some of the Palestinians trying to get out. It's a whole situation, but okay, so I'm rambling a little.
Oh, but I wanted to, it's this continuation of the story because I wanted to pause there and ask a couple questions, but please.
Well, I want to continue it a little bit.
Sure.
Roll the clock forward. Okay. I'm in Shanghai with I've got another business involved, roasting chickpeas. I forgot to tell you about that. Anyway, I'm there with my partner. We're trying to figure out what are we going to do with this business. I thought, well, we'll import French fries or export French fries into Shanghai. So after meetings during the day, I said to Sharon, my partner, would you like to go to the tallest building over here and have a drink? So we went up to the Hyatt Hotel in Pudong, which is a district of Shanghai, 92nd floor. We sat by the window, two of us, beautiful view of all of Shanghai in front of you. And we were there about an hour, ordered some appetizers. And all of a sudden, people started leaving. And by the way, prior to this trip, I wrote a letter to Netanyahu saying, I've got an idea how to solve the conflict. And just like my letter to Mandela, no response. So people are leaving. And all of a sudden, about 20 big guys come in and dressed in suits with earpieces. And make a long story short, Netanyahu and his wife came and sat right next to us. They didn't chase us out. They thought we're too. And I was thinking the whole time, where's that letter? I could have hand delivered it, but I didn't have the letter. So they talked. We stayed for about an hour, and then their family was going to come in. So my partner Sharon said, Andy, we should be respectful and leave. She's Jewish. Her husband's or her father lives in a kibbutz in Israel. We should leave. And she turned to the security guy and said in Hebrew, we enjoyed sitting here. You could have seen that guy's mouth drop about 6 inches. He thought we were just a couple of American tourists that didn't understand anything. And we were sitting there listening to the family, having a nice family discussion. So anyway, this kind of a fun adventure, but where was that letter? Darn it. I had a great idea.
Gosh. A story. What a story. All comes around. That must have been very exciting at that time. I want just in the context of your enterprise in Palestine and Israel,
Mhm.
your perspective, it sounded like shifted from making money, which was important. You're doing these things to make money, but it took on much more of a mission, it sounds like. It felt you took on a mission, almost I know you say
Well,
you're piss poor Presbyterian, but it's almost like you took on a mission to bring peace or bring some type of
I
olive
think
branch through economics or something like that. Is that true?
no,
Or no,
Bob,
you
we,
just
did,
went
we
ahead,
didn't make money. All the proceeds went back to the Palestinians and
even more to my point, it was about a mission.
it was a mission. And the mission was to show the world that people can really work together and love one another and how important women are in the equation.
Mm,
And I just couldn't get the word out. I mean, if I had somebody famous in Los Angeles, an actor or something that the press would get hold of, you could have gotten the word out. But the other thing is, failed with the coffee sleeves. So my partner then said, I'm going to do dresses. And we'll design dresses, and then the Palestinians who are really good at embroidery will embroider these dresses. And I said to him, no, I'm out. Uh, Women are fickle. I probably get some booze on this podcast now, but they want a different design quite often, and that everybody has different size. I don't want the inventory problems with in the dress business, and
mm,
so I got out. He went on for another 3 or 4 years, uh, put a store in La Jolla, California, which is kind of
yeah,
upscale.
great location.
Was successful in losing quite a bit of money. So finally, he said, I
Store.
think it's time to give up as well. So, but I feel like I failed my partner even because it was my idea for the sleeves. I thought, man, I've got ties in this coffee industry, but it just didn't work out.
But an admirable run at it and the
Yeah.
ideation. It sounds like that was obviously because you're recalling it so vividly, probably one of the major career highlights, at least making a run at it.
Well, I don't know. I was disappointed just because I don't want to disappoint poor people. I gave them hope because we bought the product. And they had the hope that anyway, it is
Yeah.
what we did our best.
Yeah. Well, you definitely got the bug of traveling, and in your memoirs, you definitely Southeast Asia, China, and South Africa. Those sound very memorable because you were around and experiencing the culture of, the Chinese people and so forth. What are some other, um, story, well, not necessarily stories, but if you have them, I'd love to hear them
Yeah,
because life
well,
is about story. But what are some other memorable countries that you've traveled, and what encouraged you to travel there and for leisure or for business?
I went to on one of my trips to the manufacturer in China. I went to Nepal
Mhm.
right after the earthquake. Um, it was people were just devastated by that earthquake. I think I don't have the right number, but something like 25,000 people were killed. And I've got two stories there. One, I want to see Mount Everest. So I can tell you now, I've ascended Mount Everest. Uh, now I think everybody probably is smiling because the word ascended is the key word. Uh,
Mhm.
$250, I rented a airplane, flew around so I could take some pictures. It held 8 passengers, and I was able to take some pictures of Everest. That's my brave ascension. But I had another thing happen, was kind of sad.
Mhm.
I came back to this hotel, and there was an elderly man, looked like 80s, holding a little baby in a bassinet. Now, prior to that, I'd seen all the poverty from the earthquake. You'd see a baby on the street on a blanket with a cup with no adults around. And I went across the street to a park and watched for about 2 hours. That baby was unattended for 2 hours. People would go by and put in the currency in the cup. And it was just a way of raising money. So now I go back to the hotel. I've got this fellow with the bassinet. He said, "Would you come help me?" I said, "Sure. What do you need?" Well, he said, I need to take some readings. Would you come up towards my room? So we went up on the sixth floor, I think. Stood outside the door, opened the door. I didn't see anyone in the room, no one else. He brought out a scale, a handheld scale. It's on a chain where you hold it up. Uh, and he said, "Okay, here's the bassinet. I know the weight. If you'll hold the scale, I'll record to the bassinet. I'll record the weight." And he did. And he was keeping a diary of how much the baby's weight had gained over a period of time. And when he opened it up, I could see all kinds of records in there. So I thought to myself, it looked a little fishy. I said, "Whose baby?" He said, "Oh, it's mine." He's 80 years old. It's not his baby. And so it looked fishy. And I thought, well, I wonder if he's selling that baby or his adoption service or what.
Mhm.
I thought maybe I should talk to the hotel management. And then with all this poverty and devastation, and me seeing that baby on the street, I said, I don't know what's going to happen to new baby, but that new baby's probably got a better life than the baby on the street. And I didn't say anything. And I don't know if that was the right thing to do or not. I still don't know. You hope, but uh, one trip to New York once, there's a guy laying in the street with a cashmere long jacket in the middle of winter, uh, dressed to the T in a suit with, again, this jacket, laying on the street. And I thought, I just walked by. I didn't say, "Can I help you?" or do anything. I was disappointed in myself for that because, at that time, I think I was about 22 or 23. And I was taught if you go to New York, just stay out of the way and don't get in trouble. And now I've even thought to this day, I wonder if that guy really was in distress passed out, injured, heart attack, whatever it is, and I could have helped him, but I didn't. So, you make those choices in life, and you've got to. I don't think you dwell on them. You don't forget them, but you shouldn't dwell and go on and try to do as much good as you can. All
Mm.
right, so I've kind of rambled there.
No, it was absolutely beautiful and real and human. Um, I hear stories from others. I have friends. I consider myself pretty well traveled. I haven't been to Asia, but Europe and all over the United States and so forth, Canada. And um, I've seen what you and experienced what you described and
Yeah,
felt and done it as well.
yeah,
Especially when I was younger, I think
yeah,
become more compassionate and introspective as you start moving through life. So thanks for sharing that. Andy, what would you share with your younger self in if you're in your 30s right now, what advice would you share with a young Andy at 30?
Oh, Bob. You know, I, okay, so I made a decision. I had children early. I was active in their life. I coached sports. I was the president of the Rotary Club and the vice chairman of the school board for 10 years and very active. But I made a decision when I was 40 that I'd given what I could to the community. It was time to give to Andy. And so I really got out of any kind of civic thing and tried to make money, thinking when I was 40, I need to make enough money so my children have enough money if need be when it's time for me to go. I don't know what I would do different. I really don't know. I think you always say, well, I could spend more time with a child or your children. But I've been broke before. I've had to work uh, after some of these losses and with the business. Starting a new business, I'd be driving a forklift till midnight, selling the customer during the day and
Mm-hmm.
delivering in the afternoon and driving the forklift for food at night. And I probably robbed them of time uh, because one thing I think is, well, I'll tell you another story. So first marriage, I've been married twice. Uh, Second marriage, 35 years. First marriage, I was married and uh, she passed away. Now, I used to take my kids once a year on a 3-day daddy-daughter backpack and just to spend time with them with a group of guys. And the rule was guys and daughters. And we'd go to the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho, which are beautiful,
Absolutely
and
beautiful.
hike into some of these lakes. I think I did it for 8 or 10 years. And so now roll forward. First wife dies at my daughter's house. And daughter called and said, would you come over? Mom has died from cancer. And I said, sure. So I go over and here she's passed away in the bed. And both daughters, I have two daughters, are at the bed. And I didn't know what to do. I said, hey, girls, let's hold hands and I'll say a prayer. And I'm not very good in the prayer department. So I said, dear Lord, thanks for the good times. Amen. That's a nice prayer. And one daughter turned to me and said, Dad, can't you do better than that? And I said, well, we were a skiing family. We've skied all over the West and we've traveled and we have this adventure and that adventure and that. And we sure had good times. I said, what good times do you remember? And the daughter turned to me and said, I remember that 3 days in the Sawtooths once a year on a backpack trip. And I thought to myself, shit, why didn't I give him 5 days? So I think time with a kid is really important. Uh, and that I think if I were to do it again, I would try to make more time for your family.
Mm. That's timeless wisdom.
Yeah.
Want to read some concluding remarks from your book here? Just spit it back at you. A couple
Um,
of things that you advice that you wanted to leave to your family, and
yeah.
taught me along the way because I think they're
But you know, I did write that book for my family,
Right.
uh, and I've given it to them, and I'm pretty sure no one's read it, and I don't expect them to until I'm gone, you know, and then maybe they'll pass it on to their children, great grandchildren, whatever. That was the purpose of writing it. Go ahead.
Well, this is a prequel then to their, jaw dropping as they read through all of your adventures and exploits.
Yeah,
Right? Is I like the following. I like to use the following. If I were to tell my family how to live their lives, I'd use the following descriptors: passive, quiet, cheerful, sacrificing, humility, honesty, hard work ethic, laughter, and compassion for those with less opportunity.
yeah,
Signed, Andy McCluskey, December 2022.
yeah, yeah. I really believe in that, Bob. This podcast was difficult for me. I've thought about it because I'm an under the radar guy, and if I've been successful, I don't want to boast of the word. I've often said, no one is as happy with success as you are. For example, if Bob won the lottery, I'd be very happy for you. But if I won it, I'd be happier for me, you know? And so I've just sort of been this under the radar guy, and I was very uncomfortable, and you've been kind to me. So anyway,
Very engaged in
thank,
life, and I've just been happy to meet you and to know you
thank
uh,
you.
through my dear friend Mark, and for many more years here. And I look forward to another Super Bowl party
Yeah,
relatively,
we
if
will.
not
I'm
earlier.
still, I'm still going, you know? The stroke just set me back an inch or two, and I'm gonna lick the thing, so, uh,
Keep pressing. I
there
think
you go.
one of the bylines here with Adventures at halftime is we're not done yet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay.